Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, depending on where you are, what time you are listening to this. My name is Winston, and this is another episode of the Revenue Alignment Podcast. I am your host, and today I'm thrilled, guys. I'm thrilled to have a great guest for you today, Mr. Sam Kuehnle. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Sam, how are you doing?
Good. Yes, you got it right. So big props to you for that one. It's not an easy last name.
Well, don't worry. I actually did my research on that one because I wanted to get it right. But Sam, before we actually begin, let me just share a bit of your background so people understand, who will be leading us through this conversation today. So Sam has held, positions as account development and lead specialist, which is, more on the sales side, and then transition to the marketing side where, he has held positions as marketing ops specialist, digital marketing manager, senior digital marketing manager, as well as team lead for digital marketing. So a lot of digital marketing there. And currently he is the VP of demand generation at Refine Labs. And the reason why I really wanted to invite Sam to be a part of this conversation, I mean, if you follow him on LinkedIn, it should be pretty obvious. But, Sam, you're someone I realize that you really get down into the details, the numbers, the metrics, which is something that I personally love because, I'm sort of left brain and right brain. But, when it comes to really proving marketing's value, which is pretty much the thesis of this entire podcast, you need to understand those numbers, those metrics, and what really drives revenue and growth in order to really get that buy-in that you're looking for. So before we even get into all that conversation, Sam, just share a bit about your background, starting out to where you are now as VP of Demand at Refine Labs.
Yeah. So how do I make my background interesting? Grew up in a family that we've had an advertising agency for 3 generations. So grew up surrounded by marketing, advertising lingo. So no surprise by the time that I got to college, business, I just gravitated towards it. Just the conversations were already in my head. I'd had more exposure to it than I realized. So it clicked a little bit easier. From there, studied that in college, went on to the business world. It's kind of funny how I got into my first company. It was less of what role did I want to get into and more I wanted to live by the beach somewhere. So I applied to a lot of places in Los Angeles and Charleston, South Carolina. The company I ended up at was the first one that gave me a job offer as an account development representative. So a lot of sales, prospecting, that type of experience. It was the hardest job I've ever had. I have nothing but love for SDRs, BDRs, all of that. Patience, my friend. Yeah, it's a tough one. So I learned a lot in that spot, but I also found that while I could hit a quota, I am not driven by a monthly, quarterly quota that just keeps hanging over you. I was like, I want to get back into the marketing side, which is what I really enjoy because it's this blend of data and human psychology, which are really fascinating to me. And so that's why I wanted to push more to that side, which got me down that digital marketing path. At the time I was at it was a large publicly traded company. There was one digital marketing person who handled an international company. I was like, there's no way that they can do it all. I'm like, I bet they need some help. So I was like, hey, can I just help you out on the side? Like, I don't need a job position for this right now. Like, I'm doing my job well. I just want to learn a little bit about it because I understood there was a big opportunity here. Right. So that's what really got me into the digital marketing world. And then from there, it's been written ever since, so to speak, as I just, continue to learn, continue to grow, adapt with marketing trends. And that's what really led me to Refine Labs today.
Yeah, awesome. And I have, probably 3 questions. The first one being, what in your estimation or opinion, what made Chris decide to hire you at Refine Lab? Because I know his process in terms of, filtering out candidates and so on is very rigorous. So in your estimation, what do you believe landed you that job?
I think he was in a good mood that day. No, he was able to put into words these things that I've been feeling for a really long time at a large company where I was like, not everyone wants to download this gated ebook. Like, people do research in different ways. People's path to purchase is not this linear function where if they visit page 1, you retarget with page 2. If they visit page 2, you retarget with page 3. And so there were these things that that I was doing that I could just tell weren't driving the results that they should have. And it was because of the broken predictable revenue model, where it's basically just put in as much as you can up top. It's going to follow through this funnel at these exact conversion rates. You're going to get revenue. But as the power really shifted from the buyer to the seller, and you no longer had to go through those gates in order to buy, you could just go to a competitor right down the street and get what you wanted from them.
Yeah.
He was able to speak to how this process has really changed. And so he and I connected over that, and through our conversation, it was basically able to see, I'm experiencing what he's talking about, but I'm coming from a large company. And so as we were thinking about, well, who do we want our Refined Labs main customers and clients to be? I came from a spot that I wish would have hired us at Refined Labs. So being able to come from that experience of knowing, like, where does current marketing break down in today's B2B world? What are the conversations that are going on with leadership? How can we position them to put them in a spot for success? It was a good area for me to bring those insights to what we wanted to go to market with at Refined Labs. And so that's what led to, I think everything just kind of, as we said, the stars align and me joining the team early on with that.
Right. And you also mentioned that you did sales early on, even though you have, that background in terms of generations in marketing. Do you find that marketers who probably have prior experience in sales tends to operate more effectively and efficiently in terms of marketing and sales alignment to drive business outcomes than marketers who don't? I mean, you're smiling, so I'm guessing you already know. I already know the answer, but what's your take on that?
Yeah, they're definitely more empathetic to wanting to work more closely with sales. And that was one of my biggest things. Was I'd realized early on that we were fighting over attribution for the same customer. It's like, we should be looking at, is the organization succeeding as a whole? Because marketing without sales, not successful. Sales without marketing, not successful. Like, we are all on a team. I grew up playing team sports. I understood, yes, you can have a phenomenal striker, but if they don't have a defensive back line that's keeping goals from getting in their own net, like, they can score all the goals you want, you're still going to lose. So you have to find this balance of really working with one another. And so that's what helped, I think, to say, look, I want to focus on sales and marketing alignment. I want to get sales team the leads that they want to follow up on that are going to be qualified opportunities, not someone that just raises their hand because they downloaded an ebook and they didn't actually raise their hand. They just wanted the content. I'm not going to tell sales that that's someone that wants to talk to them, because they don't. It's wasting their time. It's not respecting their time. Now they're not going to value the work that I do. So how do we create a better relationship overall? So coming from that angle and knowing, like, if I was a sales rep, what would I want to be working? Is that what I'm giving them or not? That's a pretty heavy reality check.
Yeah, and you made a good point in terms of that empathy and also that collaboration, which I find to be very. I mean, I'm not sure how many marketers agree with this, but I find it to be very important if we're talking about that entire buyer's journey, because, and this is probably going to get into a bit of the conversation we're going to have later on, where a lot of marketers tend to focus on, if you want to call it, the awareness, and then maybe the consideration stage, or if you want to call it top of funnel, whatever you want to call it. Marketers tend to focus on that top end of the buyer's journey. And then, once those leads are generated, whether they're good leads or bad leads, pass them to sales. Then it's just like, hey, it's out of my hands. I leave you guys to just take care of it. So how can marketers really change that mindset of thinking it's not just about generating leads and passing it to sales, but how can we, better support sales throughout that entire sales process, that to actually lead to that conversion point of revenue?
Yeah. So there's certain things marketing can do, but it also comes from the company leadership itself. The reason why a lot of marketers take that exact process, we're going to focus on the top of the funnel, give you leads after that, have fun, that's off our plate. It's because marketers' goals are set by leads. And so this is where the leadership has worked backwards from a good spot. They have revenue targets for the year, and then they work back up their funnel and they say, okay, marketing needs to generate this many leads in order for us to hit this, with a number of assumed conversion rates, different numbers in there that lead to this lead number. And then that's what's given to the marketers to hit. Marketers don't question that. And they're just saying, all right, we've got to hit 1,000 leads per month. That's what we're going to do. And they don't think about quality. They don't think about anything else, because their sole goal is a number of leads.
Right.
They're going to drive those, whatever is considered a lead. That's where it's kind of diluted. You ask 10 marketers, what's the definition of an MQL? You're going to get 10 different definitions. So that's what has led to some of the breakdown. So I guess the way for it to change is really marketers need to start being empowered to question leadership and why is the goal this number, which we're definitely going to get into later on. And leaders also need to give the marketers the power to say, look, we brought you on to do a specific job. You have a skill set in marketing, which we value. So we should also recognize there's a number of ways for us to hit this revenue target. And we have to allow you to educate us on all those different levers where it's not just more media, more top of funnel, but what's everything that impacts the path to revenue along the way that you as marketers can help us achieve.
Yeah. And I'm glad you talked about striking that balance between marketing pushing back, but also the leadership understanding that you hired the person to do the job. They're supposed to be the expert, allow them to do the job. Because I've had discussions with marketers. They've consumed content around this podcast. They say, Winston, we agree with what you and a lot of your guests talk about in terms of how we can prove our value. But the problem is that we're not getting the opportunity to really implement some of the things that you're talking about because, when we try, it's, oh, well, you just stay in your marketing corner and, do what we tell you to do and don't worry about. But then on the other end, when they aren't delivering on that bottom line, that revenue, then, marketing has no value. So why should we invest in it? So how can marketers really, I guess, push back enough or make the business case that what we're talking about makes sense, even if you don't understand it, just trust us to execute. And if we see the results, great. If we don't see the results, then you can question what we're doing. How can they make that approach?
Yeah, so it's a blend of data, using data to drive decisions. Many leaders, that's what they use to inform theirs. So how do you pull that in your conversation, but also showing the leaders you understand what their goals, what their focuses are, and speaking to that. So saying, look, I know we want to hit revenue in this specific industry or with this specific product. Let me help you get to that. And then you're going to have to be proactive because they might not know what they don't know. So right. When you can start getting into, look, we could spend $100,000 to drive 1,000 leads and that will get our revenue. Or what if I told you we could spend $50,000, get more efficient in this one way, which I can show you how that's going to get us that same amount of revenue. Would you be open to that? So showing them you understand all of the things that flow down, that's going to open their eyes and say, this person gets it, because they're not just looking at this one number up top and filling it in, but they're really aligning to what we as leaders care about. And then they clearly have an understanding of all the impacts that come into play.
Right. And just a follow-up question on that, because I've had conversations with someone who is a head of marketing, and that conversation came up where, the person was like, hey, these are based on our data, based on the numbers, this is what we should be doing. But leadership is like, nah, we see our competitors, they're getting a lot of engagement on social media, they're creating a lot of noise in the market. I guess brand sentiment is building, or that's the expectation. Whether or not that's actually delivering, leads, revenue for the competition, they don't care. Their thing is just basically the optics of it and how does it look that, our competitors are making all this noise and we're not. So how do you navigate a situation like that where it's not that they don't provide the data from the marketing side, the numbers, but it's just leadership is just completely blind. They don't want to talk about numbers. They just want to talk about, making a lot of noise on social media.
Yeah, that's where you have to have a long, hard conversation with yourself and understand how important is philosophical alignment to yourself, to your work. What do you value? For some people, they're okay with, if this is how the leadership wants to run it, we'll run it this way. I'll sit back, I'll collect my paycheck, but I understand I have to stay in my lane. If you're someone who, I don't agree with that, I think that there's another way and you're really, holding me back from growth and opportunity, that's when I would say, you might want to explore finding other places where leadership is open to that. Because I can promise you there are a lot of companies right now hiring for talent who wants to push the boundaries on what we've always done isn't working. And we know we need to change it. We just need to get the person who is able to bring this in. So that's what you say. You have to kind of figure out, what do you want to do? Where do you fit into either of those scenarios? And then go the appropriate path from there.
Yeah. And, you talked earlier about leads that are qualified, marketers trying to hit a specific lead goal. And you made a post yesterday, but it was more focused around, Google Ads, paid search. And I'm paraphrasing, trying to remember the post, but I think you mentioned something about focusing too much on, cost per leads or cost per click, and not necessarily if they're high intent leads that need to convert. So what you'll find is that a lot of marketers are executing, they're doing a lot of activities, a lot of tactics, but it's not showing that correlation between the activity and how it actually ties to business outcomes and revenue. What do you recommend that they do to really make that connection, to really drive that bottom line?
Yeah, it comes back to a lot of it is your goals and what you set, whether it's being dictated to leadership from you or what you feel is going to drive real results. So the emphasis on low cost per leads, how do we get more, and leaving it at that is a result of you just have a lead goal. How do I get as many leads as possible most efficiently? That's great. When you start to think about the longer tail of, well, we need to drive qualified pipeline for our organization, we need to drive real revenue, that's where you have to start connecting that to the sales data. And so one thing I do love about search is that you can use things like UTM parameters. Since it is someone who's going to click, I have a very specific pain, I'm going to search for that, I'm going to go to the website and I'm going to fill out a form to learn more. You can have those UTMs appended to it, and then you can have a tool like HubSpot or something else that captures that data and it stamps it to the lead record, which then goes to the contact, to the opportunity. And you can understand, okay, when these people came through this channel, how many turned into leads? How many turned into opportunities? How many did become revenue for us? And you can see clear trends around often how many you might get a lot of leads for some broader terms, really low CPLs, cost per leads, but they don't convert to qualified opportunities for your sales team. And is that due to just it's too early in the buying cycle? They're looking for how to do better, not a solution to it. Or, what are the factors that go into this? Because that's where it's really interesting. What we usually find is the higher intent terms, you're going to have less of them because when you think about it, there's less people who are actively shopping at any given time usually. So you might have two terms, one has a cost per lead of $250, one has a cost per lead of $1,000. Well, if you're gold on leads, I'm like, I would rather get 4 leads at $250
right.
than just one at $1,000, right? But if you're gold on pipeline or revenue and you see that those $250 leads, only 1 in 10 convert to an opportunity, now you're at, okay, it's $2,500 for an opportunity. If you have the high intent one that converts at, 100% or 50%, $1,000, it's $2,000 per opportunity. So you can see how quickly 250 turned into 2,500, but 1,000 turned into 2,000. So that's where you have to look at the long term and see how does this pan out for our business results, and not just look at the top level and leave it at that.
Yeah. And let's dive into that a bit more. Like, what specific metrics do you recommend? Because, we're not talking about, MQLs depends on how, as you said, depend, you can talk to 10 marketers and 10 of them will define it differently. But from your point of view, what specific metrics should marketers be tracking and measuring to really make that correlation between activity and revenue? Yeah.
So I'd say there's goal type metrics and then there's KPIs, your performance indicators. So the goals, pipeline and revenue. If I haven't made that pretty clear yet, those are the North Stars that I like to align to. What's actually keeping your business in business? And then from there, there's a number of KPIs, which are performance indicators. Too many people use these as goals and they confuse it. A performance indicator is, are we on the right path? It's not, are we doing that? Like, this is a hard and fast goal that we have to achieve. So you can look at those KPIs across things like platforms. So if you're in a Google, a Facebook, you can look at things like click-through rates. That's going to be indicative of, are we targeting the right people? If we have a higher click-through rate, you should be targeting more of your potential ICP. And also, is the messaging landing? Are we speaking to the values, to the pains that market's feeling and is clearly relevant to their searches or what they're experiencing? Another platform metric I like to use is, I call it cost per percentage of content consumed. So I know it's a mouthful. Hear me out.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So what it is when you take the long-term approach where if you're on social, instead of running a direct response, get a demo now, but if you want to educate the market, create awareness, you're usually pushing blog posts, case studies, things where it's showing how others have achieved results that you might be going after, how to do better in your job, how to make it easier. So where a lot of people get hung up is if they're not converting, it's not successful. Well, the purpose of that campaign is to educate and create awareness. It's not to drive a direct response. So that's where if the purpose of that is for someone to consume the content, what I like to do is look at how much did we spend on that campaign? And then through things like scroll depth tracking, video percentage views, you can look at how many people scrolled 50% of the way down the page. How many people watched 95% of the video? Just do a division and you can see it's $2 to get someone to read this article. It's $5 to get someone to watch this video. And then you can see what's effective, what are people actually consuming. And because the goal is they should be consuming it. They shouldn't just be clicking on the page and bouncing. So looking at that as indicators of, okay, there's clearly an interest in this type of thing with the market. Let's push this more. And over time, as more people are educated by it, you should start to see a correlation a few months later where people are remembering your brand or your product. They're going to Google, they're going to directly type your company name into the search bar. You'll see direct and organic conversions go up when people are coming back to learn more about your product when the time is right. So that's a leading indicator that I really like because it tells you, are you speaking to the things that your market truly does care about?
Yeah. And I really love that because it goes kind of in line with some of my thought process on what I believe in terms of what you measure and how you measure depends on the objective you're trying to achieve. Because I mean, creating content for branding purposes, for example, you're not going to measure it the same way how you would a performance marketing campaign, or even in some cases, ABM or demand gen campaign. So it really depends on what you're trying to achieve with that specific marketing execution. So we talk about metrics to track to actually drive revenue. But what if we're looking to scale revenue, in terms of growth? What should we be looking on in terms of that?
If you're going to scale revenue in terms of growth, that's where, doing the exercises to understand what is leading to growth long term. So in search, it's like what we spoke to earlier, understanding which keywords are doing that. But a lot of it is you have to take the longer term lens and understand that if you're marketing to people who 2 to 3% are actively buying right now, you have to adopt that people are going to come in and out of market at any given time. It might be 3 months, 6 months, 12 months until you really start to pick up. But the biggest thing is your market has to know who you are, what you can solve for. B, you have to have a message that lands with them. C, you have to have a value that they perceive as something that would help them, and then show up when they are ready to buy. And so that's where we usually see it's around 6 months when a lot of our clients start to have their performance take off, because we lay the groundwork, we start building that snowball, so to speak, and building the demand for them. You're going to capture some people who happen to be in market right then, which is great. But usually what happens is the more of your ICP that we're able to reach, who you haven't been speaking to before, they're now going to be more familiar with your brand, with your offer. And then they're going to have that conversation with the CEO who says, I can't solve for this problem. Do you know of anything? It's like, oh yeah, by the way, this product, I know all about them. They can plug in and fix this. They come to your website, fill out the form. That's when you start to see the increase in things like the high intent hand raisers, but also qualified pipeline, because they understand what you do, the value that you can bring. And so they're ready to talk to sales about not pitch me your product, but I know what your product does. Let's get you to come in and help us. So you're going to have a faster sales cycle, higher win rates, all of that. But it's adopting the long-term mindset of it, where you have to show your value first before you can ask them to come to you. You can't just say, get a demo right now and buy from us, when they don't know who you are, what you're even going to help with.
Yeah. And to that point, because especially with B2B tech, because I think that's probably where half my marketing careers was really spent. You'll find a lot of that where it's okay, we're executing marketing, we need to put in X dollars in order to get, X plus one. So basically what you're talking about is really a combination of, executing that short and long-term strategy. But how can marketers really make that business case? Because, I mean, for most CEOs, if a marketer comes to them and be like, hey, you're not going to buy right now, but we need to, put the brand out there. We need to create this content, build the awareness, build the affinity, and then over time, we'll see the how it actually impacts revenue. But most leaders that they don't want to hear that. They're like, no, show me how it's going to make revenue at least within the next 3 months. So in your opinion, I don't know if I probably asked this question earlier, I'm just rephrasing it another way, but in your opinion, how do you actually make the business case to get that buy-in for that longer term brand play?
Yeah, that's always a fun one. One thing I like to do is, take a step back from the make a business case, and I'll ask that executive, think about the last major purchase you made for our company, whether it was, HR software, accounts receivable software, anything. What steps did you take in that path to purchase? How did that come about? And usually you'll hear them start talking, oh, well, first I talked to my colleague, they're at a company similar to us, or one of my direct reports brought it up in a meeting. I watched a podcast about it. I saw a video shared by someone. I'm just like, so that was a lot of content that you consumed that's not attributable. You're not going to track it. So you were educated well in advance. You just didn't come to the website and do something right away. It was a 1, 2, 3, 6 month process. Yeah. So how do we do that for our company? How do we do that for your brand and make sure that we're showing up in the places where people want to be educated? How do we start to generate good word of mouth? How do we get some subject matter experts internally to start speaking about the importance of this topic? Because once you get that conversation going, that's how you create the demand that then leads to, when you were ready to make that decision, who to go to already from all of those items. That's what led to you finally just searching into Google one day, I'm ready for my HR software. Here's the brand, or here's the problem, clicking on that. There was a lot that went into the behind the scenes, and that's what we want to do with our market.
Yeah. That's a good point. That's actually a very great example because, and I think it reminds me of even a post that Chris made. I think it was 2 days ago, 3 days ago. I'm not sure, where, he spoke about driving, Refine Labs driving inbound leads. But, executives want him to execute outbound activities. And in my mind, I'm like, but think about how you even ended up, reaching out to Refine Labs in the first place. It's because of all those inbound brand activities. So, that anyway, I'm not going to get into that. It's just, I mean, it's common sense, in a way, but we as human beings, and myself included, I'm not going to exclude myself, we like to complicate things. But that's actually a very great example that you gave, though.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's we like to complicate things might be the quote of the month. That's spot on.
All right. So Sam, I know I had asked you to put together something because as I mentioned, one of the things I love, because I came across a webinar that you did for marketing CTA. I really saw how you broke down the numbers, like actually showing how marketers can move certain levels, to whether it's to reduce marketing spend while increasing the output, or, how can we take what we actually have to increase revenue. So I know you prepared something. For those of you who are listening, I apologize. You'd have to click on the YouTube video to watch it. But Sam, I'd love for you to walk us through that.
Yeah, happy to. And I'll do my best to speak to everything that we're going through, so even the listeners can get a sense of it. So what I like to do with a lot of our clients, to get them away from just thinking about how many leads do we need to generate in a month in order to hit our goal, is I say, well, let's take a step back and look at what's the overall goal from a revenue standpoint, because that's what's often dictates the lead number and everything else that occurs along the way. So I've got an example here where we would pretend that you've got, a customer who over the last 12 months, on average, they spend $50,000 a month in media spend. It's generated 50 demo requests for them at $1,000 cost per demo. Then they have a 20% demo to opportunity conversion rate. So that gives them 10 opportunities created each month, cost per opportunity of $5,000. And then let's say they win, 1 out of 5 opportunities. 2 opportunities won over the course of that month. If they have an average ACV of about $15,000, that means that they would bring in $30,000 in revenue that month. One thing that's not great about that model is they're spending more than they're bringing in. So they've got a negative payback period, which isn't the best. So when things come up like this, it's usually clients saying, we want to scale, but we also want to become more efficient. So what are all of the things that we should be doing in order to hit our marketing goals? Because all we know is that put more media spend into the top to drive more demo requests. And then they assume that it's all going to continue to follow through at these historical rates. So what I like to do is then break it out and say, okay, let's say there's 4 big levers that you could pull. You could add more media spend. You could improve the demo to opportunity rate. You could improve the win rate, or you could increase the average contract value. So in this spreadsheet, what we'll do is we'll go through what happens if we impact just one of these variables at a time. So let's say instead of achieving $25,000 per month before, or $30,000 per month before, you wanted to get up to $100,000. That's the goal for this year. That's what we have to hit. So what would happen in an instance like that is the client would say, okay, we have to hit $100,000. So how much do we need to spend in order to do this? So if you use all the same funnel rates as before, you would find, okay, what we're probably going to have to spend is about $111,000 just to do that. And that's, all the same assumptions. It makes sense. You still have that negative payback period. That's what would come through. That's I call it kind of like the base level where a lot of marketers sit at. They just think more money, more demos, more wins.
Right.
Now, here is where we start to get into that conversation where we say, how else can we as marketers be more strategic and really align to what the executives want to learn? So I say, let's look at the demo to opportunity conversion rate. And so what happens here is we'll usually see a lot of clients come in with, maybe 1 out of 5 people who submit the demo request form will attend the demo and then turn it into an opportunity. That's pretty low. We usually like to see that number somewhere around like 33 to 40%, somewhere in there. And so what you can do is you can run a report in Salesforce, your CRM, and understand if there's a reason for disqualification on that lead record and understand why aren't people turning in opportunities. Is it they're not the right ICP fit? Are they just not showing up to the meeting at all? Were we never able to get in touch with them? So the biggest bucket that we typically see is you either weren't able to get in touch with them after they submit the form, or they just don't show up to the scheduled call when it happens. So 2 levers that we like to pull are, 1, put the power of scheduling this with the buyer, not the company. So the traditional B2B handoff experiences, the user submits a form and then they get directed to a thank you page. Thank you. We'll be in touch in 48 to 72 business hours. You don't know when it's coming, who it's coming, if it's going to be a call, if it's going to be an email. It's kind of just in this purgatory. So what we like to do is say, instead of them waiting on you, when you direct them to that page, have it be something like Chili Piper or Calendly, where we can say, great, we can't wait to get in touch with you. Pick a time on this calendar and let's get a call scheduled. So then they can pick the day, the time, they will schedule it on the spot so they know exactly when this is going to occur. They're much more likely to show up for something like that. So that's going to eliminate the back and forth of trying to have to connect with someone 2 to 3 days later when they've forgotten about it or they've moved on to a competitor. It's already on their schedule. They know when this call is going to happen. They're prepared for it. So that's a very easy way to improve that. So in the example of this model, if you want to hit, $100,000 in revenue, if you spent the same amount of variable marketing, $50,000, you'd have to have a 56% demo to opportunity rate, which it's a little bit high. Again, as I said, we would probably expect this to be between 33 and 40%. So it's good to know, though, that this can drastically change the output of revenue. Again, I mean, we spoke earlier having to spend $111,000 to get that revenue. Now we're down to 50. So there's something here to be said about what are all these other levers that we can pull in order to hit the revenue. So another similar lever, marketers have some say with, not quite as much as the win rate. So once the opportunity is with sales, at what percentage are they able to turn those into closed won customers? Again, here it's probably not realistic. You'd have to get about a 45% win rate at $50,000 in media spend in order to achieve that. So sales reps are good. I don't know if they're that good where they can win 1 out of every 2 deals. That's going to depend on your historicals, but the main levers that you can use to improve your win rate are, as I said, you can get or train better sales reps, but there is one thing that you can do as a marketer, and it's targeting better fit ideal customers. So what that means is in your targeting, you can make sure that you're going after the right job titles or the right industries. You can get into your CRM and understand, are there specific industries or segmentations that we can find that often make up a majority of our business, and let's focus more on them instead of spreading everything across our total addressable market. Let's go after the people who our sales reps say, these are bread and butter, these who are we win with more. Let's max out that audience first before you start going broader. And that should help with that win rate, because they're going to be dealing with less so-so opportunities and more better fit potential clients. And then the final one is you can improve your average customer value contract. So what that is again, that's in that kind of the sales rep's hands. But one way that you can do this, instead of, if you sold for $15,000 before in this model, you'd have to more than double it to $33,000. But one lever that a lot of marketers like to do is you can target more upmarket type customers. So larger potential prospects, whether that's by their company size, their revenue bands, the number of seats that you sell into that product. You can figure out some ways to look again in your CRM, the deal sizes that close for larger amounts. What do those have in common? And then how do I target more of those through some of my marketing efforts, whether that's specific targeting in ad platforms or from an organic standpoint, going and connecting with those types of companies. So I start to show up more and more in their feeds. So I know that was a lot, and all of those in itself are not really feasible in order to achieve that goal. So I say, as an intelligent marketer, let's blend all of these together and come up with a little bit of reality in each of those is what's going to lead to the desired outcome. So to recap, in the beginning, we said you were spending $50,000 a month, and this was generating $25,000 in revenue. In the updated model, if we need to hit $100,000 a month, what if I said we could spend $55,000 a month, which is only $5,000 more than you're doing last year, but we can improve the demo to opportunity rate from 20% to 33%. Again, just let them schedule their own time, let them proactively, handle that side of it. So you don't have to do the back and forth of BDRs to create the opportunities. Let's improve the win rate a little bit. So we can take it from 20% to 28%, which is sitting right between 1 out of 4 to 1 out of 3 deals. Again, that's not a huge ask for your sales reps. And if you are targeting better fit potential buyers, that should be very easy for them to do. And you could even increase the average ACV just $1,500. So from $15,000 to $16,500. And if you're targeting your better fit market, this should happen on its own. They shouldn't have to try to upsell more or, do skeezy sales rep schemes in order to add a little bit more to that contract. And by doing those 4 things, you'll reach that target of $100,000 per month. And as I said, each of those in itself is not that hard to do. It's the aggregation of them all. And that's what really empowers marketers to get away from, we just need to do more spend, more up top. It's like, well, let's get smarter about everything that goes into this. And then through that, it's a lot more feasible in order to achieve this. So that was a lot. I'm going to take a breath to talk and let you ask some questions. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
No, listen, I love this for 2 reasons. One, because obviously as a marketer, I can appreciate this, but it gives marketers something that they can really point to in terms of what levers they need to whether turn on or turn off, and they can see how their activity. So for example, let's say we're focusing on win rate, or well, not win rate, because as you said, that's more the sales side, but demo to operate. And we say, okay, let's increase that number. And you've explained what they need to do in terms of better fit ICP and how they can go about increasing that number. So therefore, it gives them something. It gives like a predictable system, if you will. Something that allows them to be strategic, intentional. But I think what's even the greatest value that I see is they can take something like this and they can go to leadership and say, hey, leadership, we have a marketing spend of, it was 50. We, bumped it up to about 55. And as a result, we're able to drive this amount of revenue based on everything that we're doing. So, in order to meet the revenue targets, let's say for 2023, based on the revenue target, we're going to need this amount of budget, because you've already optimized everything throughout that entire, revenue conversion path. So it's just a matter of, scaling what's already working. So I definitely love this. I enjoyed all of this. And this is what I like to see, because as you said, when it comes to talking about how do you get buy-in from leadership, these are the type of things that they really want to see. It's not just enough to say, hey, give us $100,000 and let's just wait till the end of the year and see what happens. We just needed to spend on brand, or we just need to spend on Google ads, or organic or paid social, and we're just crossing our fingers and hoping that it generates revenue. But this actually shows, as I said, a very predictable process. So and I'm someone that I like processes where I can actually see how each activity actually affects the outcome that I'm going after. So yeah.
Good. Yeah. And I'm happy to share this template. It's got everything plugged in. So yeah, as we were talking about demo to opportunity rate, you could go in and say, well, what if we increase this to 35%? The numbers will repopulate. So people can take this template, they can tweak it with their own numbers and everything else that would be helpful. But yeah, I'm with you where I like to see how everything all plays together, but this also helps with the leadership. They understand that you care about the bottom line, and that since that's what's guiding your decisions in this, it's much easier for them to get behind. And it's not just marketing wants more money, but they understand that it's going to lead to more revenue for us, which is what they're always asking about at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely. So, well, I don't know if you have a link to this. I can probably include it in the when I post the videos in the description of it.
Yeah.
But thank you. I appreciate that. We appreciate that. Definitely the audience, I know, will get value from this. So Sam, in closing, because you've delivered so much value, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, but in closing, what closing thoughts? Probably, I didn't ask a particular question, or something that never came up, but it's on top of mind for you right now, that marketers that can really share with marketers to help them, educate themselves on how to prove their value at a C-suite level.
Yeah, I say the biggest thing is, the C-suite, they don't know what they don't know. So you can encounter some ego in the C-suite, so you have to be mindful of how you approach it. But when you're able to align and show them that can show there's other ways that we can impact the bottom line, or, coming up with ideas around, we've always done it this way, but you've seen how much marketing has changed in the last year alone, let alone 10. If you're running a strategy from 10 years ago, is this still the best way to do it? So coming up with ways to, if you want to try something new, absolutely love it. You should be, but also think about, from their point of view, how can I communicate this to them and not throw it in their face and say, we need to do it this way, you're wrong, but I want to test this experiment out. Are we okay to try this? I think this might be a good way. So approaching it from not a confrontational side, but look, let's help the company continue to grow and push. I think that's something that I learned the hard lesson on early on was, having a hard head and saying, why are we doing this? This is dumb. This is broken.
Right.
I don't advise going that way. Definitely come from a place of, let's test, let's try this out. There's something that I think we could do that's going to lead to better results for the full company. It's much easier to get them on board with something like that than it is to come at them, coming in hard and telling them they're wrong. That conversation's not going to go well. So continue to test, but also think about the side of who you're wanting to convince to get onto it.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I love that. And just one final question based on what you just said. I'm curious, how do you see marketing being different, when your parents, grandparents run their agency versus how you see it executed now working at Refined Labs? Like, if you could probably name one major difference.
They were running print, TV, and radio, which 2 or 3 of those are not even important anymore. Yeah, it was different how you got in front of people then. But one thing that is coming back full circle, which I find to be really interesting, is in print, in radio, you can't measure or attribute, was that commercial successful? It's not a direct response, but you would see, we ran this commercial, our business went up that month in that section or that part of town. We can do the same thing with digital marketing. Even though it's not direct response, we started to educate the market more. So we saw a correlation to business going up around that time. So right. That's where I say, the medium may be different, but human psychology is human psychology. And that's what you have to understand, like how this all fits together into influencing people to want to come to your company.
Awesome. Sam, thank you so much for coming on, for sharing your wisdom. If people need to reach out to you to continue this conversation, where can they find you?
Yeah, LinkedIn's the best spot. I'm very active on there. So Sam Kuehnle, definitely check out our company, Refine Labs, as well. We've got a great podcast. So very easy to come across us.
I concur. So thanks again. Thanks again for being on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Winston.
This has been the Revenue Alignment Podcast. Join us next week where we have more amazing content to help you demonstrate, communicate, and improve your value at the C-suite level. I'm Winston, your host, and this is a wrap.